weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Best New Comics of the Week show. That means I'm here with my man Gray, straight from Japan. It's early in Japan, I guess. Well, it's mid-afternoon. It's late here, past the witching hour. What up, Gray?
Is it past your bedtime, Jim? That's what I want to know.
Well, that's the thing. I would love to say it is, but it isn't. It's not even close. I've been going to bed at like 4:30 a.m. each day. One of the things, though, is that I have this weird bad thing. I'm almost out of my Adderall, and there is a shortage on the Adderall in the U.S.
Uh-oh.
So I don't seem to be heading towards getting a refill. So with that, I've been like kind of rationing myself with it, and actually rationing, trying to wean myself down because I don't want to have any sort of withdrawal or anything from it because it looks like a lot of people aren't getting it. But to make up for that, I've been drinking like Death Wish coffee all day, and that's even worse. So I have not been able to go to sleep. And I've had some problems. I'm very jittery. I'm also jittery because I think that of a best of show, this was a pretty bad week of comics. There weren't a lot of great comics, especially we keep talking about the big two. Yeah, they're not very good. And I even said, and Sus Gabe, doing the reviews, each week he'll send me a list and he says, hey, I'm going to review these. I barely look at it. I'm like, whatever you want to do. But I do end up seeing like, Marvel has so many books, and yet none of them are good, it seems. Like, they could have 15 books come out, and 2 are worthwhile, and it's starting to drive me nuts.
That's how it feels at the moment, isn't it, Jim? Yeah, it's kind of depressing.
And
it really is.
I'll get the one thing is that I'm not into, and I don't think you are either, the Venom War stuff. And,
oh, no.
Like, I didn't hear anybody hype for it going into it. I haven't heard anybody talk about it since it happened. But yet each week, at one point I thought, okay, we have a couple time, whatever. Now it's like half the books too. And like, that's already giving me, hey, half these books you're not even going to touch, which is fine. I'm a lazy guy. But the thing is, I like good comics. And this week, Marvel came through with not just not good, but awful. I mean, Dazzler and people will lose, oh, Dazzler's the worst. Please, if you say Dazzler's the worst book of the week, you haven't read Spirits of Vengeance by Jason Liu. That might be one of the worst things I have read in the last 10 years. It was that bad. It was
painfully
horrible.
bad, yeah.
Oh, it was laughable.
Ugly looking comic as well.
Oh, my God, it looks so bad. Oh, it was just bad. But we're not here to talk
There's
the
a connection
worst.
there, Jim. Do you know that? Jason Liu wrote Dazzler as well. What a surprise.
Yeah, it's crazy. And actually, I say that, there is, oh my goodness gracious. But yeah, all that going, not very good. So when we go off now to the good books, there's not a lot. There isn't a lot. We're going to start with DC as we always do. And you have the one pick there. And again, if everybody, I always usually say this, I forgot, let us know what your picks are. Hopefully people if you liked a ton of things at DC and Marvel, please tell us because I need somebody to guide me somewhere where I can find some good books. And I think I've read just about all of them. But even so, if you liked it, tell us why, and maybe you can convince me to go back and read something again with a different look or whatever. But I don't know. I don't see it, but we'll see how it goes. But we'll start with DC. What is your book from DC?
The only one that stood out for me this week, Jim, it's no surprise here. John Constantine, Hellblazer, Dead in America, issue 9, written by Cy Spurrier with art by Aaron Campbell. So this, I tell you what, I'm glad you kind of not taught me into it, but you reminded me about this was out, so I read it. Delighted I did. This can actually work as a one and done story. You don't have to read the previous 8 issues to get this, but it is deep, Jim. It is dark. It's talking about going deep into Hollywood, Hollyweird, what's behind it all, like selling souls and, magic, sacrifices, reality. It's all out there. It's crazy. It's almost too much to take. You need to read it twice.
And people really have liked it. You've liked it. There was like one issue that you told me was kind of down a little bit.
Kind of like, a little bit slow, a bit boring, but it feels like he's saving his best for the last few issues.
That's cool. And the thing is, I don't like Cy Spurrier. His Flash, I think, is garbage, but I'm glad that he has something. But everybody has a character they write well, it seems. I mean, some have none, but it's good when you do have a character. And
it is, yeah.
I talk about it on the podcast a lot, on our DC Comics podcast. Cy Spurrier legitimately has come out in interviews and said he really didn't want to write The Flash. He gave them a pitch that he thought was going to be something they wouldn't take. they took it and then he had to do it. You can tell that a Constantine Hellblazer is more his deal. The other thing I wanted to say, though, is because I did kind of mess up to make the deal. The Spirits of Vengeance was by Sabir Prasada, the guy who ends up doing a lot of the Miss Marvel stuff. It was me as well. I'm telling you, it's late. But you end up where he's the one, if you don't recognize the name, during the Dark Web, he did the crap-talking Mosque. That in that one issue that was completely awful, that Miss Marvel time.
How could we forget about that?
Yeah, really, he's not good. And that Spirits of Vengeance was god-awful. But again, the whole thing, people tell me, and again, there's some things where if people are in our Slack chat or talk to me a lot, they kind of know the books that I would be down with or whatnot. And people say to me, like, the Cy Spurrier, John Constantine Hellblazer is good. But they also say that I wouldn't like it just because of the things that I like and not like.
Shout out to Reggie, Jim. Reggie, I'm sure
exactly.
he would be loving it.
He would love it. He loved the first round of it. He got me to read it, and I actually didn't mind it. I thought it was pretty good. I thought that it was elevated in a way that it kind of got a little elevated more than it should have, and it was because it ended early. We had the shutdown and things like that, but it was pretty good.
Maybe I'm biased, you know. I'm a long-time fan of Hellblazer. I've been reading it from the beginning. It's also, he's kind of tying it into some of the really good Sandman stories. Like, the kindly ones have come into it, if you know what they are.
Another Reggie thing. Sandman's the thing. Really, I mean, the stuff that me and you end up doing on your YouTube page and then on our Patreon, we end up doing a Grant Morrison show.
We do.
And we go through the things, and it would be something that if we ever got done that, the Sandman stuff could be like right in with that as well, because some of that is really, really cool. But that's it for DC.
That's it for DC.
That is it. And I ended up this week on our DC Comics podcast and even our Patreon Spotlight. We reviewed most of the books. The one book I haven't read that some people may bring up is Zatanna, the all ages kind of black label for some reason book. Maybe that would be something to grab onto. I haven't read it, but the other stuff that I read was pure garbage. I ended up where the book of the week I had was pretty much a 6 out of 10, and that was the All Winter book that I'm bored of. I'm not really enjoying that, and that was my book of the week, only because the score was the highest, but nowhere near a best of deal. But we'll go to Marvel, where we have 2 books, one that I'm sure people will yell at us, as they always do, and then another one I think that is one that they won't mind. But we'll go with the one that they'll yell at us for. I'll just give the credits quick, but me and Gray will talk about it. Then Ultimate X-Men #7, written and art by Peach Momoko. And I get it. I say it all the time. I do stuff with Wes from Thinking Critical. I have to bring it up every time. I understand why people wouldn't like it. And if you don't like it, it's fine. And I don't think you'll ever like it. I don't think it's ever going to change. I don't think there's going to be jumping back on point for people who have left it. It's just not that kind of book. But if you are liking it I'm liking it as just a quirky side thing. And that's the thing. I don't go into it thinking to myself, okay, it has to be the biggest X-Men book with the biggest team and going whatever. I just go in with it. Okay, it's a side thing. It's the Ultimate Universe. We have a way to explain why you don't have the big characters. So what does Peach Momoko do with it? And I like the characters. I think it might be I think the art's getting better too. I don't know about you, Gray, but I actually think the art is better. And this issue, you add a lot of big characters, right?
Yeah, great to see him. Talking about the art, it's lovely to see Kanon in here, and she's doing kendo. She is kicking ass in kendo here, Jim, isn't it? Loving it. Loving seeing her in this. I don't know the characters that well from like a few issues here and there, a few one-shots, but what can you say about Ultimate X-Men? She's not changing it, Peach Momoko. She's sticking to her guns, isn't she? Like as you said, if you like it, I think you'll be loving it.
Okay.
If you don't like it, you won't change your mind.
No, and here's the thing that I think might explain to people a little. Me and you are not lifelong X-Men fans.
No.
In fact, we don't know a lot about the X-Men. So that might be a disadvantage a lot of times. Might be an advantage here because we just go into it. Plus, you live in Japan. I love Japan. Me and you're not a big manga fan, but I am. But you're in Japan, and this is very Japanese-centric. It has a lot of things. You have festivals that are mentioned. I even mentioned you on our podcast that every time I talk to you, there's some sort of festival going on in Japan. So they even have one in this and going on, and it's a lot of Japanese
It's actually a holiday today, Jim. Believe it or not. It's the autumn equinox, which they celebrate here.
I guess Jason said that the festival that was in the book was actually happening like the day before this whole thing was
the
going on in
Moon
the
Viewing
issue.
Festival.
Yeah, the Moon
that was a big
Festival.
thing here. Yeah, on the 19th. There certainly are. Any excuse for a holiday, that's what I say.
Yeah, exactly. And again, we always, growing up, I always heard that the Japanese, they work 24/7 and they were going to, take over everything. Now I find out they're on holiday every 2 days. I think that we were told something different, but I love manga, and this has the manga feel. I know that when it first came out, people were arguing, well, it's not I understand what it is and what it isn't. But if you do like manga, I think it's an easier entry point into it. If you're from Japan and don't mind the watercolor type deal, there's a lot of obstacles to go in. But I think if you do get past those, you end up having a quirky book with some cool characters. And yeah, you have Canon in this, and I thought she looked great and really was like, again, Peach Momoko has this knack where when I'm reading it, you may not get a ton of character, but I seem to fall in love with the characters. Like May, I think, is great. And Canon with her brother, if you are a manga fan, it really plays out like Spy Family with Yor and her brother Yuri. It's really cool. And again, this isn't going to win over X-Men, Marvel fans. I understand that, but I did like it. And yeah, you get what looks like Sinister in this.
Yeah, this is getting bigger and bigger, isn't it? I think it's really like, moving this issue. The Children of the Atom in here, it's very, very interesting. Viper, who's this Viper, Jim? I want to know more about the characters.
And Viper being the side, almost like the right-hand gal of Emperor Sunfire.
Yeah,
and
Sunfire.
She
knows.
We
haven't seen yet, have we?
No,
even?
And we saw a poster of him. And she actually knows the names full out of the gals that we're kind of following that don't seem like they're that big or on anybody's radar, but they obviously are. So there's a lot of things going on. And you have the Shadow King, the kid, and he looks like you kind of get a little sympathetic deal with him that he, and it's
He's
pretty
being
cool.
used and abused.
And there's a lot of things.
This issue gets dark. That suitcase scene. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, there's bodies cut up because you have what looks like Sinister say that they've had some problems. Some kids have died. And he claims that he's gotten rid of the bodies. He's kind of like putting them in suitcases and throwing them down by the river. I mean, there's some crazy stuff. Again, I don't think this will win over anybody.
Move.
But no. And again, it's kind of the funny thing of like, why didn't you just burn the bodies then? Like you said, it was very odd. But yeah, there's some big things. I like the characters. I like the art. Some people don't. But I think it's a book that if you want something quirky and different, you definitely have it. And I think that it comes down to that. Like a lot of people, and I've even gotten arguments about the, Ultimate Black Panther. It's just a Black Panther book to me. There's no real reason for me to, read that instead of maybe going back and reading.
It doesn't feel different or new or, challenging something, does it? Like
you can tell me that it's better than Tennessee Coates' Black Panther, but here's the deal. So is mine. And I'd never written one. So, that run stunk. So I don't care. But I could just go back and read Christopher Free stuff. It's nothing different to me. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. A lot of the books in this Ultimate Deal are like really slow burn. Seems like they're waiting for the maker to get back, but that's going to be like a year. I can't take it. But that is on our list. I have one here that is on my list. We'll go really quick with this. It's Wolverine Deep Cut #3. Written by Chris Claremont with art by Edgar Salazar. I think the art is really, really good, and Chris Claremont is just giving you a fight book. It really is just a fight book in this. You have Wolverine fighting the Marauders, but he finds out they're clones of the Marauders, so by the end, he's going to actually then have to fight the real Marauders. In the meantime, he gets jumbled up in the point where his head is where his neck should be. I don't know if that makes sense, but his arm's a leg, his leg's an arm. He ends up having his face in an armpit. It was pretty crazy.
It's a frightening scene, Jim. You got me to have a look at it. I was like, oh my God, what's going on here?
And it's funny. It's like, I would love to say that, and I don't love body horror stuff, but I'd love to say it's body horror, but I was laughing the whole time, so I don't know how much horror it is. It's like body horror laughter.
Can you unscramble this puzzle?
Oh, it's crazy. He just keeps going and everything. And he ends up getting through that. And then at the end, he's like, oh, now I have to fight the real Marauders. Because when they went in, they thought they were the real deal. They end up going and seeing it's a Sinister stuff and clones. So you end up seeing the Marauders, the real Marauders in these tubes. And then they get out and they're going to fight them. And that's kind of what it's been. It's just been fight after fight after fight. But it's good. And it actually is fun. It's like one of those where it's never going to be a mind bender. It's not going to mind freak you like Chris Angel. But it might just impress you like a David Blaine. But nobody likes David Blaine. But you end up where at the end, I thought, every time I read it, I'm like, you know what? I had fun, And that's something I'm not having with a lot of books now.
Jim, if you're missing like action, as you said, if you're missing fight scenes, in the many other X-Men books, check this out because it doesn't hold back. It just end to end, isn't it? End to end fighting.
And so I would say people who don't like the Ultimate X-Men, and they say, "Oh man, it's not the X-Men" or whatever. I would say read Wolverine Deep Cut. Don't go and like Jed McKay's X-Men came out this week, and I'm telling you, this whole out of the ashes. It's kind of dumb. It's not dumb. It's dull.
Me,
it's dull. I don't know why I say I meant dull, but not dumb. It just ends up ashes. Yeah, and it's just everything's kind of like, when are we going to get to the good stuff? And we were talking about this on the Aficionados this week, kind of about this stuff. I didn't say that much, but you end up where I bailed on Krakoa. I'm over Krakoa. Why aren't these books? Like, a lot of them just keep bringing up stuff. And even then, there's a lack in all of the big two. I think the biggest thing is a lack. It's a lack of storytelling. It's a lack of having stories that mean anything. It seems like these stories are just going through the motions. Nobody has any sort of imagination going. And then when you get somebody who actually does get it, they end up seeming like, the gods among men, like a Jeremy Adams, who is doing Green Lantern and is doing such a good job that it makes it elevated how good he's doing, because everybody else stinks. And it's nothing imaginative, nothing really going on. Kind of like why I like Ultimate X-Men, actually, is because it is something different. It seems to have some imagination. But with Chris Claremont, he's just having fun. It's a lot of fights. That's what it is. I like it. I think that Edgar Salazar's art's really good. But that's it for the big two. Done with them. We're going to move on. And pretty much we have image books are what we have for me and you on the indie scene. And a couple of them that I haven't read, but I will be joining you in with some of these. But you can start with one that you have recommended a bunch of times.
Yeah, it was issue 4 now, Jim. It's Falling in Love on the Path to Hell, written by Jerry Duggan, art by Gary Brown. So this is it's a fourth part. It's a concluding part of the opening story arc. And I've already said, I think, enough about this, but it's a Western meets a samurai story set in some weird alternate dimension where people pass to if they've died, if they've been, if they've killed people in their lives. You go to this weird, almost limbo area, and I'm not sure what the rules are, but the two main characters, Asami-chan and McCrae the cowboy, they're kind of starting to, have feelings for each other. They're starting to fall in love, as it says on the Path to Hell, and I like it, but well, what can you say? You read some of the issues, didn't you?
I read the first issue. You had told me it was good, so I ended up reading, and I'm like, I'm going to read all of them. I never did, but I will eventually, maybe.
One day,
maybe. I have a lot of things on my plate. I got a lot of dirty songs to write and read comics, but I like the first issue, and a lot of people have recommended it. But like you said, you've recommended it pretty much every time it's come out, so that is a pretty good book. And again, a lot of people are down on Jerry Duggan with the whole X-Men stuff. So it's kind of cool.
I understand that.
And again, like I said, there's a lot of writers who get, certain characters that they're able to write better than others. And somehow lately people are shoved where they, it's like a round writer in a square book. It just doesn't work. But when it does work, it's pretty cool. So
he seems to work better with his own stuff, doesn't he? Doing his own stories.
It's like Ram V
things.
In my mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when they end up being able to make the rules, and that's the thing. Sometimes, like a Ram V wants to change things or do his gothic horror stuff, and it may not work for, say, a Batman. But when he does like a Dawn Runner or even his other stuff, people end up really liking it a lot more, and that's cool. I don't mind that at all. But the next book is a book again, and it's a book that I see a lot of people always put on the list, and it's crazy because every time somebody talks to me about it, I say, well, it's that many issues in, and I don't know, but they always, no, it's like one shot, you can do it. So I have occasionally read some of it, and every time I've read it, I really liked it, though I do have a little bit of news. I don't know if you knew about it, but you tell them what it is, and then we'll talk about it.
Well, to me, it's amazing. It's got this far. We're up to issue 41 of Ice Cream Man, written by W. Maxwell Prince, art by Martin Marazzo. $3.99 from Image Comics, of course. It's just, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits. It's its own story in each issue. There's only been a couple, Jim, with 2 or 3 parters, I think. It's, as you say, it's a one and done usually. You can read it without reading any of the previous issues. I'm sure you'll enjoy this if you like James Bond.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge James Bond guy.
Oh, no.
But I did page through this, and I thought the cover was great. I thought the cover looked so good. What I did hear, I don't know if it's true, if it's one of the things, but I did hear that there's a possibility that Grant Morrison might jump on and do some issues
I've heard rumors about that,
and I saw a lot of people react to that in a bad way, saying that, like, we don't need that.
No.
I don't know. It'd be kind of cool. But I'm telling you, the cover is great. It's just pure James Bond, but he has the ice cream cone in it. And I did see, as I was going through this, Ice Cream Man's actually in the issue for like a brief moment, like
very brief appearance.
Yeah.
Like,
and I hear you don't have that a lot, so that's kind of cool. But you do have this James Bond character in Cuba doing these things, and it's pretty crazy. I mean,
is dark, dude. It's a dark issue.
There might be one
story.
of the craziest scenes in this with just disgusting. It's not body horror. It's just straight up just destruction of somebody's head. It's really crazy. Yeah.
They took his brain.
Exactly. But again, it's one of those things where I have to read some more of it because everybody suggests it. Every time it comes out and we end up talking about stuff, people end up mentioning that it is one of their favorites of the week. And I don't think it disappoints often. And like you said, I keep being told a lot of them are one-shots, which is kind of cool.
You know what, Jimmy? It's easy to miss it because it does kind of skip months. It's not monthly. It used to be monthly, but I'm just looking at the last few issues and, there are months gaps between it here and there, or 2 or 3 month gaps sometimes. So you can kind of forget about it, but it's always worth looking up. It's always worth checking out.
Yeah, and this one has a crazy, crazy ending. I'll just say at one point he yells, "Holy cow," and that is very accurate.
Holy cow, man.
It's pretty funny at that point. But I'm telling you, when he goes in and finds the one guy who's just destroyed, it's like, holy crap. It is pretty bad. Then finds a severed head of an. It all ties in. And again, this is very Twilight Zone meets James Bond. But it's pretty cool. I actually, I had paged through it. Me and Wes talked about it a bit again on his Patreon.
Okay, nice one.
I ended up paging through again. I liked it enough. Like I said, I get weirded out if I'm like at issue 41 and I've only read like 2 issues up to there, but it does work out to have that be the thing. But we'll move on. We're getting close to the end, and we're making some good time. We still ended up yipping and yapping a lot. I don't know why, but the next one I did read. The next one I did read, and I know a lot of people were worried because it is The Moon Is Following Us #1, written by Daniel Warren Johnson, which everybody's like, oh, that's awesome. And it's art by Riley Rossimo, which, not many people think is that awesome, but it actually works out. I actually thought that the book looked pretty good. And it's not. Daniel Warren Johnson does a little bit of art in it as well. Yeah. When his art comes in, you're like, yeah, I wish he did the whole thing.
I know, I was thinking the same thing, and it's a bit mean to say that, because Riley Rossimo does actually work in this issue.
It works. It's just his art ends up, and it works with the play, and I think that Daniel Warren Johnson is good enough and smart enough that he realizes, if I'm going to get Riley Rossimo, I need to have a reason why. And you have a twist. Maybe we won't spoil the deal because it is a big thing. But the way that the world is set up here, it makes sense to have that fantastical art of Riley Rossimo. And he does a decent enough job. I mean, some of the things, I actually think some of the vehicles that he has, there's a drop ship. You would never imagine, but Riley Rossimo can still draw those crazy eyes on a drop ship. But it actually looks pretty cool. And the only thing that I thought of this, the only thing that I really was thankful for is that I could see Daniel Warren Johnson somehow thinking that Riley Rossimo should be on the Transformers book. And you don't need that. Like, don't go that crazy. But it might have worked a little. I'm telling you. You know what I mean?
Jim, it might work. It might work. Because there's some scenes in here, it's kind of weird fantasy, isn't it? And there's some animalistic characters as well as like human characters. I think it works really well, even at some like a sacrifices, but maybe he'd be good on
actually,
that.
It would be kind of. And again, I'm not even close to being a Riley Rossimo fan, but it's because I think a lot of times I've read it like the Tim Drake book, or at one point Batman during that Monster Men deal. It just doesn't work. He's put on books that don't work. So when you do see him, I'll tell you. When he was on Harley with, I think it was the Stephanie Phillips deal, it worked enough because Harley's so crazy you can get it going. But even then, you can't have a book that's based totally in reality when you have Riley Rossimo because it's so wacky. Even like the Sandman book, I didn't love it because it ends up making something that should be reality look like fantasy and but But if you're doing fantasy and you're doing crazy things, I mean, in this, you have a kid bat with a bunch of hands who ends up opening up his cape, and it ends up having all these guns. Like he's like, down in the alley. Hey, kids, you want some gun? It looks great. I thought it looked really good. And there's some things in this that really look cool. And I think that Riley Rossmo actually accents the deal because of his crazy over the top thing. His eyes are what drives me nuts. Usually it's the slug necks. The necks usually drive, but he dials back the necks, but he does end up having those eyes and also chins. And you have the main guy character. He has the Rossmo chin that drives me nuts every time I see it.
It's pretty big, Jim. I tell you what about the twinkle toes? There's a couple of panels that get me. Those cursed twinkle toes coming back into it.
I'm telling you, the twinkle toes that he had a lot in the Tim Drake deal has it in the one play is when the lady, his wife, yells, "G.D. it, Duncan," and ends up severing a head off. And then you look over and Duncan's got the twinkle toes going. I'm like, come on, dude, get going. But you end up having a twist by the end. We won't reveal what it is, but the twist ends up making the book like that much more. It actually, like at the end, you're like, okay, this is a cool fantasy. Oh my God, the twist. You're like, oh, this is crazy. And what you would do.
Yeah,
for kids and things like that. And
the other thing I liked about it, Jim, is the way we're dropped right into this story without any explanation, aren't we? And I don't mind that, as long as it's not too narrative heavy, or it just moves. It's action, it's exciting, it's intriguing. It's weird, a bit bonkers,
Yeah. And I like that you dropped in because the twist then it's more of a twist.
Yeah, then it works.
If you didn't drop in, it wouldn't work as much. So I do like it. And also, if you want to know, if you haven't looked at it, the main character, lady, just looks like Big Barda. It's kind of funny how much she looks like a Big Barda / Wonder Woman, but it works for the story. Again, when you get to the end, you get more Daniel Warren Johnson art, and I'm like, yeah, I wish it was all that, but Riley Rossmo does a decent job.
It reminded me of Do a Powerbomb near the end there.
Yeah, actually, it does look that good.
That's a great series.
It goes from crazy fantasy look to ultra detailed, almost dirty at points, the way that Daniel Warren Johnson makes things go. There's clutter in every panel that he does, and I
so
always
much going on, so much detail.
That's what one of the things I loved about the Beta Ray Bill deal that he did at Marvel, which I think is fantastic. That's people excellent. Should read. It's in that ship they're in, everything's clutter and everything's leaking, and it's a really cool deal. But yeah, like I said, there's a twist at the end that really ends up setting it apart, and then you go forward. So I want to see what goes on with that. But we have one more book, I believe, right? Just one more?
Yes.
And it is a book that I added at the last second, mainly because I didn't have enough books that I was going to do. And I kind of get called out for this by a couple of people each and every week that this book comes out. Again, it kind of feels weird to give it, it's almost like double dipping at a point, but it is The Walking Dead Deluxe number 97. And I end up doing a podcast every time The Walking Dead Deluxe comes up on our Patreon. Me and my man Jason, we go through them, and I love it. I haven't watched the TV show, not one. I watched the first episode, and people will laugh if they've seen it. Obviously, most people have. I got to the point where that little girl gets shot, and then I was done. That happens within 10 minutes, I think. I never saw anything more than that. And I never read the comic. So when the Deluxe deal came out, I said, I'm going to, get into it. Every time we do an episode, I do have to say almost every time by the end of I see why this is so big. And we're on 97 now. So we're getting to issue number 100. If you are aware of the Walking Dead show, comic, whatever, it's getting towards Negan. We're about to be introduced. We've seen this. We've had the Saints gang. They're already trouble. All this. You have Hilltop there in Alexandria. All this stuff going. But it is heading towards that issue number 100 with Negan. And again, I actually have avoided a ton of spoilers. I know nothing about The Walking Dead. The only thing I know is because I work with my man Eric that I do the DC stuff with. And a guy used to come in and yell stuff to him. Like, hey, did you see Walking Dead this week? Blah, blah, blah. None of it ever registered because I wasn't. But I did end up having the one time he showed up and said, hey, can you believe he didn't even know Glenn's name? He just yelled, can you believe the Asian guy died? And I'm like, oh, that's great. And so when I started reading it, I think that if he would have said at that point, can you believe Glenn died? I would have never remembered it. But when he said, can you believe that Asian, this is a guy at that point, it's gone so long, he didn't even know Glenn's name. But he's like, that Asian. So it stuck with me the whole time. So as we're going, there are a couple of times in and out, like, oh, I think Glenn's going to die now. Like it's kind of been pushed and pulled back and whatever. Yeah, I think that he's dying in issue 100. Now, people will be like, if they know or whatnot, but it really is set.
I'm just looking, Jim. I didn't realize it comes out twice a month.
Yeah, it's twice a month. And it's a weird play, too. It's not every other week. It's twice a month. So sometimes you'll get 3 weeks between, depending on how it comes at the end of the month. But it's kicking. I think
the main difference is it's color now, isn't it? It's in color and they've got new covers.
Yeah. And in that, I didn't say, but it's Robert Kirkman, Charlie Adlard, does the original deal. Dave McKeag does the deluxe coloring, and it's a really cool deal that at the beginning, and I think Dave McKeag's doing a really good job. I think he struggled a bit at the beginning, but he's nailed it now. Now it's like when we would talk about it, there was a lot of times like, oh, he got this, or what did he do that? Now it's just kind of a given. It looks really good. And I'll give him credit because he's coloring a book that was originally obviously shaded black and white.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You end up, when you have to color it, you are still dealing with that black and white shading. The black shading is what it would be, which would be overdone because it's black and white. You have that with a manga and stuff like that.
I used to read it, Jim, back when it was black and white. I kind of dipped in and out of it, for quite a while. So,
and there are times, again, I didn't read it when it was in black and white, but there are times that I think that, I couldn't even imagine, like, well, if this was black and white, but I understand that's going on because, a lot of blood and stuff like that, and it really ends up being accentuated in this. But yeah, we're at a point in this which just heading towards that 100. If you haven't read it, too, there's the letters from the original deal, which is pretty funny. And I did hear that whatever issue it is, when Glenn does die, I'm telling you, I kind of figured out whatever. But I guess they said like a couple issues later, the guy who plays Glenn on the TV show ends up writing in a letter yelling kind of as a joke at Kirkman about why did you have to ruin my character and all this. So that's kind of funny too. But they also have a cutting room floor at the end where Kirkman goes through his original outline, talks about what he was going to do, what he wasn't. And sometimes the outlines, he actually has like the pages still. And he does it very loosey-goosey. He's just got a page of paper and has page 1, this, page 2. And there's some things that you see and he tells you like, I was originally going to do this. Or I was originally going to kill this person. It's really interesting. It's really cool. And then you have a cartoony little Bites deal that deals a lot with Carl, but it's like a Mad Magazine type deal, like a goofy place. So there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it for what you end up getting in this. And it's $3.99, but you do get a lot of stuff. And I think it's, Robert Kirkman's probably like, I made a lot of money on this already because it's $3.99, it's still $3.99, but you do get a lot of bang for your buck. And you get those new covers, which a lot of times in it, the play that he spelled out was obviously originally you couldn't spoil anything on the cover. So that would ruin. But now since people have read it, since he does have the covers a little more of what they are. Now, one last thing too, it's funny reading it. You didn't realize, or I never realized it until a little bit, but you end up where he has weird cliffhangers. What he does is he ends up making it so that if you've ever read The Walking Dead in trade, he doesn't separate the issues. You have it just one thing, and that's how he writes it. The cliffhanger always will lead into the next one, like tit for tat. Like it's like turning the page to the next thing. He doesn't like a disconnect between them. It's kind of a funny thing. But that's it. I figured I'd add some extra mumbo jumbo because I'm always criticized for not adding the walk. Actually, when they end up where somebody be like, well, why didn't you say walking? I always forget. By the time we get to the show, I forget. But this was again, I didn't even say, but it's a big issue where Rick ends up going against the Saints gang where he's doing too much. He should really, I don't know why. He seems to want to press Negan's buttons without even, we haven't met Negan personally yet, but he hears all about this and he wants to, push the whole idea that there'll be hilltop security and Negan's nothing and he's probably not any, and it's gonna bite him in the butt. But a lot has bitten Rick in the butt. He's kind of over the top. And then in the meantime, at the end, you end up getting, if you're aware of it, Eugene and Abe are going off to find some supplies, and it looks like the Saints gang followed them and they're going to grab them. So we'll see how that plays out. So I don't know if they're going to end up. That's the one thing about reading The Walking Dead is it gets sad at the point where you like, man, I love this. Oh, he's dead. Like you fall in love with
the characters and you're like, oh no.
It's a tough play, but you don't get that as a big two. That's one of the
Well,
things.
that's good about,
why
a
it's
creator who's like brave enough to do that. He will build up a character for issues and issues and issues, it could be even years, and then kill them off. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, and Carl's killing people. Everybody's killing people. And though at first, even like I kept worrying that Michonne was going to die, but I'm like, she's a little too badass. I think she survives. But yeah, there's some really good characters, and if you haven't read it, I suggest checking the Deluxe out. But that's it. That is it for the show.
Jim, is it okay just to do a very quick honourable mention, just to shout out? This has been 10 months in the making, folks.
Yeah,
it is. Dynamite Comics finally bring out Fire and Ice. No, not that one. The one that's based on a classic animated movie. Fire and Ice by Bill Willingham and fantastic art by Leonardo Manco. That's why I wanted to shout it out. There's, I don't know how many double-page spreads in this. It looks like you can understand it's taken 10 months to bring this issue out because the art is stunning. Absolutely gorgeous.
I'll give a shout out to all the people who yelled at me that there wouldn't be any delay on the Gargoyle of Gotham that's now delayed for over a year. So I just wanted to point that out because I remember when me and Simon did the review of that and we're like, this guy has not done enough art. There's no way this is going to be on time. And no, it will be.
The story's decent, Jim. It's kind of like basic, fantasy tropes and things like that. But as I say, just like look at the art. It is beautiful. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, I might check it out. It's one of those that, again, I didn't know how much I would enjoy Conan when it came out. Again, me and Jim Zub, whatever. But even the idea, I thought I was kind of over Conan. And then it was all goofy stuff at Marvel. So when they got it at Titan, and I really liked that. So I want to check out Fire and Ice.
Surprised a lot of people.
And I did check out, I think, the first issue, and I thought it looked fantastic, and I thought it was really cool. I just, again, if something's delayed, it loses me. I never know when it comes back. I never know what's going on.
Crazy. You got to admit
that is crazy. So that's wacky. But with all of that, a little honorable mention. Thanks everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please check out Gray's Wakazashi's Tea House YouTube channel. I'll put that in the show notes. All that all rolled up into one, and hopefully we'll get better comics coming up. We still ended up talking the same amount, but I need to like some comics. Yeah, exactly. Hello, love. I end up by the end, like, I read comics to enjoy myself, and it's sometimes like these weeks is a bit of a slog when you have more books that stink than even mid. And it's just, it gets kind of...
I feel like I keep saying the same thing, Jim. The indies are killing it at the moment.
And actually, and the idea indies are killing it, indies saving it. If it wasn't for indies, we wouldn't even have a show. We'd have to give it up, and it sucks.
We'd have one book or 2 books a week, that'd be it.
Yeah, exactly. And if people don't realize, like, I end up having a DC show, then a separate Marvel show, and then an indie show, and it's kind of fun doing the indie show. When you end up doing too many of the DC and Marvel books, you just keep running into garbage, and that's what happens. But it might get better. A lot of people are looking forward to DC, the all-in, and the absolute stuff. That's kind of cool.
Too.
And if you wanted to go check it out, me and Wes from Thinking Critical, we ended up doing a dual review, a spoiler review of the new Absolute Batman before it comes out. That's on our Patreon. You can check the show notes for that and stuff like that. But that is it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Gray. And we will talk to you all later.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.